Good evening, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 51. Thanks so much for joining us. It's a little bit late, but so glad you could join us at 10 p.m. at a different time. If it were up to me, I'd do the show as late as possible. I used to work a lot of overnight shifts, and I'm a big Art Bell fan because of that. And I love the nighttime radio kind of deal. And so the more it feels like that, the better. But I know on the East Coast, it's tough for everybody to join us as late as 10 p.m. or even later. I think the Art Bell show starts at like 1 a.m. or something. But Courtney Kampa, today's guest, much anticipated guest, is teaches a class every Tuesday night. So I had to do it a little bit later, but I'm so glad that you could have it. Jessica Dawson says, let's have it at midnight. Never sleep anyway. Yeah, me neither. That's the thing. I love the late night. So before we begin, I should say Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. We are working to promote the practice of poetry and unaffiliated with any other organization. If you enjoy what we do, all we ask is that you click the like button and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening or watching this broadcast, and make sure that you're following it and you click the notification bell and all that stuff, and tell your friends that this is a good time through poetry. So Courtney just finished her class, so we're going to kind of kill a little bit of time here. And I thought for the warm-up poem, I laid out a few of my favorite Poets Respond poems, and I thought we would start with that. So this is one of the, I think this is Megan Collins, After the Memorial. And this was, I think, the fourth poem that we published, maybe the fifth, from the Poets Respond series way back in June 29th, 2014. And this is a poem. I'll read you what it's about. Megan Collins says, I wrote this poem in response to a local tragedy in which a teenager, Austin Totkus of Ellington, Connecticut, was killed in an ATV accident. On Tuesday of this week, there was a memorial in which people gathered to let go of balloons filled with messages they had written for the boy. The idea of this tribute moved me, and I wondered what would happen to those messages. Where would they end up once the balloons popped? In writing this poem, I imagined a kind of healing end to that story, both for those who knew Totkus and those who didn't, but are similarly affected by their own personal heartaches. And so I love this poem. It's the first poem that really made me cry reading it on the submissions. It's such a beautiful tribute. And then the other cool thing about this poem by Megan Collins is that the family of the boy who died found this poem and loved it and reached out to Megan and I think used it as part of the memorial. So here is Megan Collins' poem, After the Memorial.
After the Memorial. It's an elegant thought, sending messages to heaven. So they gathered on the football field, slipped into balloons the words they might have otherwise written in his yearbook. They used their functioning, unpinned lungs to inflate those bubbles of color, then held each tied end tightly before finally letting go. Candles in their hands, they watched the balloons drift farther away, the distance becoming as massive as the impossibility of an accident had been. People lingered as long as the light allowed, then, in huddles of arms and bowed heads, turned away, the flames and sunset burnt out. But balloons, fragile as bodies, burst when they get too high, and the next morning a woman working in her garden, miles away from the field, found, I never told you this, but I love you. It was nestled in the petals of hydrangea, and she stared at the note like the handwriting was something she remembered. There was also a girl, pigtailed and proud of her chalk drawings, who glimpsed a white scrap in the grass. You're the kind of person I always wanted to be, but I was afraid. She was too young to understand the words, so her mother, home now after a double, read them aloud, her breath catching. And the boy's father, who sat on his front porch, barely seeing the lawn laid out in front of him, only felt the note as the wind dropped it on his feet. You were so much stronger than I ever was. You were beautiful and brave and alive. Impossible as the fact that he'd had to plant his son like a seed in the earth. Here were his own words, sent back from the sky.
Again, that was Megan Collins reading her poem After the Memorial from Poets Respond, one of the very first poems we published over 6 years ago now with Poets Respond. And Megan Collins is author of The Winter Sister. She teaches creative writing in Connecticut, where she lives, and is the managing editor of 3 Elements Review. I think we have time for one more of these poems I pulled out really quick. Now, my second favorite poem, I think, although it's hard to write poems like this, but another poem I thought I'd pull out is this. Of course, Zaina Hashim-Beck was winner of the first Rattle Chapbook Prize, and this is a poem that we published a year later, on September 6, 2015. This is Ghazal Back Home, and it would end up added after the fact to her Rattle Chapbook Prize collection, Arabi Song. But this is submitted for Poets Respond and written in 1 week, which is just amazing. This is a beautiful ghazal. This is Ghazal Back Home by Zaina Hashim-Beck.
Tonight a little boy couldn't walk on water or row back home. The sea turned its old face away. Again, there was a no back home. Bahr is how we were taught to measure poetry. Bahr is how we've stopped trying to measure sorrow back home. All that blue is the sea, and it gives life, says God to the boy standing wet at heaven's gate. Does he want to return, to go back home? My friend who hates cooking has made that eggplant dish. Says nothing was better than yogurt and garlic and tomato back home. On the train tracks, a man shouts, hold me, to his wife, bites her sleeve as if he were trying to tow back home. 13-year-old Kinan with the big eyes says, we don't want to stay in Europe. Just stop the war. Just stop the war, he repeats as if praying, grow back home. Habibi, I never thought our children would write, help us, on cardboard. Let's try to remember how we met years ago, back home. On our honeymoon, we kissed by the sea, watched it rock the lights, the fishing boats to and fro, back home.
And once again, that was Zaina Hashim-Beck reading her poem Back Home about the Syrian refugee crisis from September 2015. And you can check out that poem and many more in her book, Arabi Song. Just go to Rattle's chapbook page, find that. I thought it was a good transition, too, because our prompt for the week is write poems in a form you haven't tried before. So a bunch of people sent in poems. We have a whole bunch of people lined up, ready to go after we talk to Courtney Kampa to share their poems about some kind of new forms that they've never done before. And if you would like to do that, I'm putting this up on the screen right now. Open mic at rattle.com, all one word, or is how you spell it. Open mic at rattle.com. Email the poem there so I can show it on screen. And then you can call in at 818-850-7727 or send me a chat message over Skype at Rattle Poetry, all one word. If you call, let it ring a few times. I'll call you back when the time is right. If you use Skype, just send me a chat message really quick, and I will call you when it's your turn. So that's after the show in about an hour. But now Courtney Kampa is coming up. And Courtney Kampa is maybe the most requested poet we've had for the Rattlecast. We started publishing her, I think it was maybe 2012. She was a finalist for that Rattle Poetry Prize. Then she was a finalist 5 more times for the Rattle Poetry Prize. She was a winner of the Reader's Choice Award once. And people keep saying, like, who is this Courtney Kampa person? And I've wondered the same thing. And she has a book out now, Our Lady of Not Asking Why, which was selected by National Book Award winner Mary Szybist for the New Issues Press. Her works has received awards and distinctions from Best New Poets, Poets and Writers Magazine, The Atlantic, and others. She's a Ruth Lilly finalist and received her MFA from Columbia University and was a Wallace Stegner Fellow at Stanford from 2017 to 2019. She currently lives and teaches poetry, writing in Nashville, Tennessee. I think right now she's in Charlottesville, Virginia. But here she is. Let's call her up. Courtney Kampa. So the phone is ringing. Usually I have people on the line ahead of time, but Courtney had a class ahead of time. Hello, Courtney. Can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear you.
Great. Well, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the Rattlecast today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
This is a thrill.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to have you. As I said, I don't think you heard the introduction, but you are the most requested poet, I think, that we've had. Every time I post one of your poems, someone says, you should have Courtney on the Rattlecast. And so now we have you. People wonder, and I wonder too, who you are and where you come from, kind of, because you started winning or being a finalist for the Rattle Poetry Prize a long time ago, and kept being a finalist over and over again. It was kind of amazing. Like, you're like the Poetry Prize queen or something. So
I'm the bridesmaid.
Yeah, I guess the bridesmaid, but you did win the Reader's Choice Award. So
yeah.
So do you want to start out maybe reading a poem, and then we'll talk a little bit?
Okay, yeah. Get my book. What poem would you like?
Oh, anything you want. Whatever a good poem to start with would be.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, let's see. I wasn't prepared for this. I thought maybe the poem that kept me from publishing the book for a long time, because I was waiting for it to happen to me.
Oh, really? Interesting. Well, you have to tell me about that.
It's a love poem.
Okay.
And I knew that I needed a real, actual, earnest love poem before I wanted this book to go out into the world. So I had the title already, but I waited for it to happen to me, and then it did.
And what page is it on?
It's called Skin and Other Weapons, and it's page 56.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Skin and Other Weapons. You worry me, jumping out the shower so quickly. Contrails of soap in your wake to where I'd fallen. Smallest glaciers down your neck, your ears, your wet lashes gathered into spears, turning my foot over in your hands. 26 bones like a loose bundle of sticks. The underside so dirty, I'd never in my right mind let you see. Debris picked up off the kitchen floor, the way a room will stay a while on your skin. The way this morning we broke eggs against the stove to watch them shiver in the pan. The coffee grinder's two blades set half an inch apart, as if afraid of wounding each other. Your body goosebumped, tending mine. Your clothes a heap in the hall. Socks balled up on the bathroom door. At the bathroom door, my stray blondes laced into their soles, as if stitching me to you. And you holding out your hand for the sterilized pin, as if to say, give me something to hurt you with. And I do. Head thrown back, like watching the surgery channel when a doctor mid-incision tells the camera that in cases such as these, the best way to the heart is through the spine. How you flinch whenever I do, at the wrong angle tenderness sometimes gets a hold of, asking, is it here, or here, or here? Shrapnel too small to claim a weight, or color, or shape. How little love is, how worth everything.
Yeah, and that was...
I'm going to take...
Yeah.
I'm going to take one of these earbuds out, but I want to make sure it still works.
Yeah, you can still... Yeah.
There we go.
We're good.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's good with one ear. It's weird. It's weird reading poems without being able to hear yourself read them, for sure. Yeah. So how would you describe what the book is about? It's an interesting series of poems. I think to me, it felt kind of about coming of age and through love and beauty in the world. But how would you put the book?
Yeah, it was definitely a kind of like of a reckoning about what the definition of beauty was, and it was a reckoning of what it meant to be a woman, what it meant to be a sister, what it meant to be related to someone versus not related, but still feel so completely enmeshed and in tandem and involved. It was a lot about but it was mostly about sisterhood and religion, and this fascination that I had with the Blessed Mother, and with what kind of role a maternal figure has with people, both with spirituality and also in real life and that kind of thing. I have no idea, honestly.
No, that's good. I just like setting people up and then having them talk for a while. Vicky Miko asked if you could explain the title, and I was wondering maybe if you could read the poem that the title comes from, and then maybe talk a little bit about that, because the spirituality angle is interesting too.
Yeah, that's Ars Biologica. Do you want me to read it or explain it first?
Whichever you think is better, but yeah.
No, I'll read it first.
Okay.
That's okay. Let me just find it. Yikes. Yikes, McGee.
46.
Okay, Ars Biologica. Yeah, thank you. Page 46. Ars Biologica. And this is off of the sort of the idea of like an Ars Poetica, which is, a self-portrait basically, but playing off that trope. For my sister Grace. Forgive me for forgiving her, your birth mother. I am unforgiving, unless for selfish reasons, and it seems my reasons are as selfish as they come. I'm trying to say that I am thankful for your grief. Thankful at least that it keeps you here, where daily your cheekbones bend a little higher toward the stuff Mongolian bridges were inspired from. And little woman, or soon woman, I can feel you growing through our floorboards, bones lengthening in your torso, skin whipped by an upwind gust of prepubescence. And today I bought 3 bottles of nail polish you'll like from CVS. Hugh's called Not Really a Waitress, Plasma, and If You've Got It, Haunt It. And although I mostly bought the last one for myself, I bought all 3 for you in reparation for last week's purchase. Me so happy with this color, which I painted on your toes and still feel bad about. You know by now, not all of us are Irish. I know by now you knew all along why Aunt Donna gave you Asian Barbie dolls for Christmas. Why, when you asked Mom buckling your car seat, "Did I come out of your tummy?" she said, "Grace, you came straight from my heart," and then got really quiet. According to your recent Google history, there are lots of questions you aren't asking, and that's probably my fault, since you don't ask questions the same way I don't, when I don't know how exactly to respond, and all of us learn exactly by example. For example, the drugstore cashier on 106th is from a town 3 miles from your own, and all I ever say is wave goodbye. Or that with only sisters, I don't know how to talk about a brother. Yours. He's probably with her right now, closing their front door shut to the cold, churning soap in his hands. Keep him around is a purplish polish I used on you last month. Your sticky palms quiet on my knees. Your fingernails shaped differently than mine. The family rosary going on and on around us. This family like an afterworld. Our Lady of Loss. Our Lady of is there something fixable inside us? I can't see your mother, but I can see you hate yourself for wanting her. Forgive me for forgiving her, for giving you away. Mothers are never a metaphor for something else. Our Lady of teaches that having been loved badly is not the same as being unloved. Our Lady of not asking why. The broken heart has need for other hearts broken differently, but one sister in ruin ruins the other sisters identically. There are days when your footsteps out our kitchen and up the stairs carry you to places I can't find you. Nights when the outline your body, peach hot, fevers into your when the outline your body, peach hot, fevers into your sheets looks nothing like your own. The past should go away, but never does. It bangs inside us like an extra heart, though it is not. It is not at all like that.
Yeah, and that was Ars Biologica from Our Lady of Not Asking Why. Yeah, so one of the things that I was... actually, you were going to talk a little bit about the religious undertones in the title, so I don't want to cut you off there. Can you explain a little bit about that for Vicky Mika?
Well, if you hold that thought, yeah, it's a quick thing. It was just something that my mother said. My mother is so beautiful and so religious and wonderful. And so she one time was upset about something, and she had said, because there's this idea in the Catholic canon where there's a litany of like Our Lady of, and so it's this repetition, which actually is so right in line with poetry. And she had said, I know we're not supposed to ask why. And I was so struck by the faith and the beauty of that statement. And also just the fact that I was writing poems that all it was doing was asking why. And so I didn't mean it in like a tacky irony, but Our Lady of Not Asking Why was sort of like this implication of all I'm doing in these pages is interrogating life, but at the same time have this stronghold on faith, and I'm not supposed to be doing so. But it was this beautiful question she asked. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I want to create my own kind of litany of like Our Lady of this, Our Lady of this, Our Lady of this. Because that's just how I've seen it played out. That's a really weird answer for something I've never had to really answer before.
No, that's great. It's kind of like the patron saint of answering questions or something, which is almost like what poetry is. That's what such a fascinating title too, because it's sort of like poetry explores the things that we don't quite understand, and so sort of Our Lady of Not Asking Why, sort of the saint of all that, the saint of poetry maybe. So that's pretty cool. One of the things that I was reading through the book, thinking about why you keep ending up being like at the top of the big Rattle Poetry Prize list of poets. And the thing that jumped out, again, comparing all the poems together, is your sense of the way you move through a poem. There's a very sort of a leaping sort of, you never know where you're going, and then you pull out these amazing lines. Like in that poem, just the past should go away, but it never does. It bangs inside us like an extra heart, though it is not. What is your writing process like? Like, do you... I always feel like the process of writing is sort of like finding a way to let go and let your subconscious speak a little bit. And I feel like great lines like that come out of the subconscious somehow. That's always been my opinion talking to poets over the years. Is that how it works for you? And how do you go about like moving through a poem? Do you do a lot of revision? What's your process like?
I do a ton of revision. I sit with a poem for probably a good month and get so much so much gratification from just the movement of like a line break or a misplaced comma and that kind of thing. But honestly, you know what this reminds me of is when I was at Columbia, the late Lucy Brock-Broido, she had this theory, and I've told my students about this every time I get a chance to. She had this theory that there were two types of poets. One is the cow poet and one is the cat poet. And the cow poet is the poet who sits down every single day and makes an intentional sort of, I'm going to write for, like the Billy Collins poet, like I'm going to write from 7 to 9. And I'm, every day that has to be a part of my, my daily like process. And the cat poets are the ones who like sort of just, sorry, this is not a great like example, but it's just a few months out of the year where they really become proliferate and start to write. And I'm definitely that. But in the meantime, I try to aggregate as much. I mean, I have a full wall of just like anything that inspires me or lines that I wish I'd written or poems that I love. It basically looks like I'm a terrorist. It's just it's
like a literal wall. It's like covered a whole wall.
A literal wall of taped up poems, and then I kind of just like stay with them and look at all of them and wait till something about them happens. Like the one that I just read, The Skin and Other Weapons, I had that poem title like kept up on that wall because I knew I wanted to write it, but I didn't write it for 4 or 5 years. And then it was just happening to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. Like Skin and Other Weapons is happening to me right now. So it's just like, for me, it's more like you sit on lines that you've written that are important to you until they happen. And sometimes that's very helpful. Instead of just starting and staring at a blank page of paper, it's helpful to have some sort of lines that you're working from.
Yeah.
And that's always been really important to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting. It's sort of a poet's version of, we had the only non-poet, I feel bad calling her a non-poet. She is a poet, but Janet Fitch was a guest on this maybe 6 months ago or so. And she has a file cabinet full of just lines and descriptions of things and different characters that she hasn't used yet. Like it's fiction, so it's different. Because, you have to put together character and plot and move around scenes and descriptions and things like that. And it's a lot more mechanistic maybe than poetry is. But it's sort of the conspiracy theorist wall is sort of a poet's version of that maybe. That's interesting to hear. Let me ask, how did you get into poetry? The one thing that struck people, which made them sort of very curious, that they kept seeing you in Rattle, was how you kept saying in your bio, your contributor, your age. You said, like, I'm 22, I don't know anything to say about poetry yet, in the very first one. And then you said, I'm 23, and blah, blah, blah. And you got into poetry and really doing it well at a very young age. How long have you been writing, and how did you get into writing poetry?
I think I started writing it when I was about 20.
So 2 years after you started writing poetry, you were a finalist for the Rattle Poetry Prize. Is that what you're telling me? That's kind of crazy.
Maybe 21. I don't know. I don't remember. I was a third year at UVA. Well, gosh, I don't know where to. I was dreading this question because I really didn't know what to say about it. I was a homeschooled high schooler because I come from a family of dancers. My sister was a very accomplished dancer in Russia. And in the meantime, when we were in high school, we were like spending the summers at different like Boston Ballet and that kind of thing. And then I had a couple different, well, 3 different surgeries on my feet. And one of them still has my left foot kind of numb. I can't feel anything on the bottom of my left foot. So that kind of ended ballet for me. Not that I at all thought that I was going to go professionally. Like, you know, my sister was next level. I was not. But I took a year off. I worked at the UN as a lobbyist. And then I went to the University of Virginia, where I actually met my husband. I didn't like date him, but we knew each other. And I just accidentally sort of stumbled upon poetry classes. And I was like a bulldog that had been refused cake. If you can like kind of like think about the face of a dog that just like a bulldog that had just gotten cake and was like, where has this been all my life? I was sort of like, oh, okay. And then came my 3rd year when I could actually apply for what Lisa Russ-Barr heads. It's one of the best undergraduate poetry programs in the country, and it lit up my life, and it was wonderful. And I'm going to sound really trite and silly and cliche, but it was like, oh, this is what I've always been good at, which is describing things and conveying things in ways that can attempt to make it matter. And that was the most important and compelling and invigorating thing. Like, that was what felt liberating, was knowing that writing can do that kind of thing. And it was wonderful. And I still have some of the best friends ever from that. And Lisa Russ-Barr is one of the best poets that I've ever known, and one of the most wonderful mothering figures ever too. Sorry, does that answer the question?
No, that does. That really answers it. Is there a poem that you read that sort of like clicked with you, or that you wrote that sort of made it all sort of mean something all of a sudden? Because I've had that. I mean, and I've talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people have this experience where there's just one poem that's like, bam, poetry's awesome. And then you try to do it and you're terrible at it. And then you're like, bam, I did something that was creative and this didn't exist anymore. And there's that like rush of like something cool just happened. And then you become addicted to poetry for life. Did those things happen to you?
Yeah. There were so many. Lee, I used to go to this chapel at St. Thomas. It was this little like offshoot, and it was just one place to be quiet because UVA is so huge. And I remember reading Lee Young Lee's entire book, Rose, which was like confoundingly important to me. But one poem in particular was Stephen Dunn's poem, but I moved without it, so I don't have it anymore, and I can't find it online. But it was Stephen Dunn's poem, Juarez.
I don't think I know that.
Oh, it's just this beautiful poem about like how his wife and he and his wife were like would kind of fight over who gets to tell stories. Because it's like, who does it belong to more? And it was so beautiful. And I actually had to learn it by heart in front of Alice Quinn, who was the New Yorker's editor for a long time. And she just came on my classes as a guest teacher. And that was one that was really big. How about you? Do you have one?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Lee Young Lee, because that was the first, both Rose and the City in Which I Love You were two books that I did in college. I was a science major and just taking poetry as sort of a fun elective, and then a dual major, and then I kept creeping over. And a lot of it was Lee Young Lee. The first poem I loved was The Snowman, the Wallace Stevens, because I felt like a snowman growing up in Western New York. And then, and so I just like diddled around with poetry. And then there was one poem that I wrote where I didn't know I knew something. And I was like, wow, like that's an insight that I had in my head. And I didn't know I knew that. And that's when I sort of became addicted to writing. Did you have a poem like that where it like clicked and you became a poet? I think that's when you become a poet, is when you write something that surprises you. Did you have a poem like that?
I did. I think it would have been, it was actually poems about grace, which you posted today on Rattle.
Yeah.
That was where I sort of was like, okay, that's how I want to sound as the writer. Like before I was trying to sound like other writers. And that was the first time that I sort of stepped into my own voice. And
it's kind of a long poem. Do you want to read that, or do you would really read shorter ones? It's totally up to you. You can read whatever you want.
Oh, okay. I can read it.
Okay, it might be good because it's good. It sort of relates to the last poem you read too, so it's a good.
Yeah, it is. Okay, poems about grace. Uсть-Kamenogorsk, Kazakhstan. 1. The video is soft and grainy as an ultrasound. 11 seconds of a caretaker holding a baby girl up by the armpits like a potted plant. When the woman bounced her in the air, the infant shivered the way petals do when wind grasps a stem too thin, too breakable to hold. We stood a foot from the screen for hours. Rewind and play. Rewind and play. Inside us, something raised and gathered like a scar. We were an ache, a gash sealed for someone other than ourselves. My husband boiled pots and pots of tea. We wouldn't sleep, that baby out there burning, remote and lonely as a star. 2. At the orphanage, she learned early not to cry. No one came. 12 children per nurse. She lay with sleeves safety pinned to the mattress. By mid-afternoon, her window darkened like a clot. Blackness welled up and pooling, pushing even the clouds from their sky. Maybe in the stillness she heard a starling. Maybe she wanted to sing too, got as far as opening her mouth, but didn't know any songs. 3. To adopt, you visit first. This is labor. It is unpinning your baby's arms from her crib of toothpicks and lead paint. It is her squirm when caressed, caught between an instant of panic and her lifelong yearn. It is the cautious curl against a mother's chest, how her brown lips part like an upturned beak as you darn the holes in her clothes, the punctures made when fettered to her sheets. It is your impulse to encircle her like a womb, to feel her breathe and kick in her sleep, to hear her heart faintly against yours, that pregnant syncopation you thought you'd never know. 4. Touch had turned her hungry. All night she wailed, her mouth the O of an open drain. The next day a nurse yelled, "You ruined her, held her too much." The vein running up her neck stood out like a blue cable. She had taught this child what was good to know, that life would be low-pitched and solo, that dream is just another word for tunnel, that to be born means the same as to barrel, the same way a train does from its station, the way this child had from the body of a mother who first cut her brakes. 5. Her toes like tiny hooks pulled me up from the world. Mornings she put the undersides of her feet together as though in prayer. I learned a new way to talk to God, her little feet in my mouth in each sentence I spoke. Once, seeing her socks on the staircase, the shape of 2 white eggs, I burst grateful into tears. She hears us, hovered at the door, stretches wide like the confident roots of a flower, and outward earthen turn. See how her veined palm draws gently toward the roots in mine. Our dangling threads crocheted into a trellis like lace, a helix we've doubled and twisted by hand. Sorry, that was long.
No, that's a great poem. That was Poems About Grace from Our Lady of Not Asking Why. And what is it about that poem where the voice felt right? Like what is there a way you can describe the difference or something?
I felt very presumptuous to write it. Just, like it's so in the same sort of vein of Ars Biologica, because it's the one, Ars Biologica was in my own voice, but this one was in the voice of my mother. And so I felt bad presuming to know how she felt. But she gave it the stamp of approval and that kind of thing. So I don't know. It's just, you can only, I don't know. There are a couple of poems that I did that where I spoke in other people's voices throughout, and especially in like the short essays where I was speaking for other people. But who knows?
Yeah,
who knows if it ever works?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about those short poems. They're such interesting little interludes, and it's sort of like I felt reading the book like I was sort of entering a big house and a big family of sisters, and then you're getting like snippets of things that you hear from the next room with those poems, which made it sort of feel, I don't know, there was sort of detached isn't the right word, but like it made it feel like more rounded or something as those approach in. And there's such an unusual sort of style of poem to do in a book like that, and then space it out that way. How did those come to be?
Well, I do like to think of them as sort of like a modern Grecian chorus. I like that sort of, like, I grew up with, like, that felt like a fun kind of like alleviation from the intensity of some of the poems, and I tried to space it out accordingly. It really just came because I was at Columbia at the time, and I was living in a Columbia given apartment for their graduate students. I just got kind of lucky, but it was on the first floor, and I didn't have like a white noise machine, so I would just lift up my my window, and that kind of just constant noise would help me go to sleep. But what I would notice was I would catch wind of all these different sort of arguments or like things that were happening on the street, but you would only catch this really small snippet of it. And so it made me wonder about casual language, and how if you only catch like one little brief snippet, how that changes the entire thing. And then I would think about like, okay, what about line breaks, and how would colloquial talk become a poem in and of itself if you broke it into lines in the right way? And so then I just went crazy, and I didn't even know if it would be the right thing, but then it was just so much fun and I couldn't stop. So there were about 20, but only I think 6 made it into the book itself. But it was like inhabiting my father's voice. Like there's a poem called Short Essay at the Sink, and then there's one in my grandfather's voice. Like like a random woman. Like it was just a kind of fun project. And then I started to get really attached to the idea of how colloquial thought can be made sort of elevated and important, and imbued or kind of injected with this urgency. I don't know.
Well, it was definitely an interesting effect reading the book. It's weird. I'm trying to like articulate what it feels like, but there's a way that it feels like it's not getting too personal or something. Like it sort of pulls you back from the idea that the voice is always like one person, and it makes it like a larger, more expansive theme, I think, which was a really interesting effect reading the book. Do you want to maybe read one of those so people can have an idea of what we're talking about? And I should say, while you find something, that if anybody has any questions for Courtney Kampa, I'll leave them in the chat window. I'm monitoring both Facebook and YouTube. And I see we have a question I'll ask in a minute from June Smith. But first, let's hear one of these poems. And what page is the one that you're reading on?
I'm reading the first one on page 17. Okay. Short essay at the sink. Oh. If you're not going to tell her, I am. If you're going to sit there smiling while our little girl brings home a clown like that, I don't like this at all. I got a real bad smell off that guy. Don't act like you didn't notice how he peeled that orange. I've never seen anyone so confused by a piece of fruit, acting like you handed him a Rubik's Cube to snack on. Good God, Kate. No, I'm serious. You want grandkids? You think that guy's going to give you grandkids? You're crazy. I'll be nice about it, don't worry. I'll be a goddamn poet. I just got to pull her aside and remind her that people die all the time without ever knowing simple things about themselves. She'll get what I mean.
Yeah, so that was a short essay at the sink. I love that it brings the humor out. There's a lot of humor in this book too. Is that you that your father is speaking about in the poem? That I was wondering.
I think it's just more of a generalization of his sort of initial decision about the boys that we would bring home.
Yeah, that's the other thing that was going through my head a lot reading this, because my daughter is 10 now, and so I'm very close to that age where I'm going to have to be the father and make decisions and stuff. So I related to that a little too much, a little more than I wanted to, I think. So June Smith asks if you can talk a bit about how you write so vividly about childhood. Is there a way that you go back into that space, or strategies you have, or anything like that?
I think sometimes it helps to have a kind of so much of what I was writing about when I was writing about childhood. They were prompts that we were receiving from. I was like 24 years old. It took me a long time to actually submit this book because, again, I was waiting for a couple poems to really come my way. But most of it was done by the time I was 25. And when I was at Columbia, there were so many interesting prompts that triggered memories. And that was really like where you would sit and be like, okay, how did I feel about that? But if you just sit there with a blank canvas or a blank Word doc, it is very difficult to conjure. You know, it helps to have Lucy Brock-Broida would give us word banks that we had to, incorporate, or, various prompts. And suddenly you were like, oh, I remember that. Like, oh, I remember. Like, there's a poem in there that before this interview, like I was kind of flipping through the book and I was like, oh, mercy. And that's a poem about just squeezing my sisters and I would play this like weird game of mercy during Mass, just like during the Our Father, when you would hold hands. And it was just this really mean game of just trying to see who would crumble first. And it's weird memories like that, where it's like, oh man, that was so like, and then you like make all of the different, you connect the dots of what that means as kids. And I don't know. This is what I was afraid of. I really don't quite know. I just think like the more that you take notes, once again, like that, having that wall of things that I write and then tape to the wall and then wait. And then you have this sort of, this thing to pull from, this great deal of work that you've spent, years of occasionally writing and taping up. And then you can cobble together a poem that suddenly you're like, oh, that's what I was thinking all along.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like there's a sense of meaning that we have. Like it's like a sixth sense or maybe an eighth sense or something, where we sort of know that something is meaningful, but we don't know why. We just like intuitively know. And especially when you're a kid, so many things happen that you know is significant, even at the time, but you have no idea why or what it means. And then later, looking back through poems, it kind of, you can put it all together. Do you want to read that poem since you talked about it?
Oh, okay. Mercy?
Yeah.
Let's see. Again, I haven't thought about this poem in like 3 years. I was like, whoa, I forgot about this. Mercy is on page 55. Okay. Good. Mercy was the game we played, squeezing hands during the Our Father at 10:30 Mass. The winner, whoever hurt longest in silence. Only the small muscles of sisters, the brittle glow of her hair, its morning smell of butter and eggs. Glasses hooked around my ears, lenses thick as Oreos. Learning compassion must be begged for. But what we knew of begging was singing orphans in musicals. And what I knew of need was the $1 Richard Berry gave me to tell people I was his girlfriend, folded in my pocket till the collection basket had passed. All I grasped of her hands at that age was their color, green-white, sticky, bruised, like squeezing a pear. Our bodies bent over the pew, driven to sound but kept quiet. Call it ruthless or resistless. Blame it on the edges of our playground where gentleness was just a lack of something stronger. Or the way deliver us sounded in Latin. I thought belief could be touched, her pulse quickening in my hands. I have not forgotten what it looked like.
And that was Mercy from Our Lady of Not Asking Why. Were you a student of Gregory Orr? I think I remembered that, and I think I mentioned it last episode. Okay, so Daniel Musk just wants to know about taking classes with Gregory Orr and how did he influence your poems. And he's one of my favorite poets, too. We interviewed him in Rattle number 23. We went to a play together, too, because Alan took us to see The Goat. But and it was just a really, really memorable and eventful night. I love Gregory Orr and his book concerning the book of the body that is the beloved, I think if that's right. It's just one of the most inspired books. It's almost ecstatic.
I think his wife did the cover art too.
Yeah, we published a whole bunch of her. That's Patricia Orr or Tricia Orr, and we published a bunch of her paintings of his poems too in our visual poetry issue. But yeah, and then he has such an amazing life story too. So if you, I think it's Rattle 23. If anybody watching at home wants to know more about Gregory Orr, start there. But then his books, he has a bunch of amazing books. But so what did you learn from Gregory Orr, I guess is the heart of Daniel Musk's question.
All right. I got two things to say about Gregory Orr. One is what I learned, and the other one was what I experienced. The third is that I love him so much. He is so mysterious and so enigmatic and funny. I know that he runs here I'm here in Charlottesville actually, so I could just drive to his house right now. But he runs with a notebook.
Oh wow.
Tied around his neck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
He runs with a notebook, and I don't know where he keeps pen in his hair or something because he's got long hair. He is so funny and so weird, and like I love him. And he just when you go into office hours with him, he just puts his legs up on the table, and you're like, okay. But the first experience I ever had with Gregory Orr was, I think I said something. I didn't even think anything of it. I think I must have been a third year, and we were in a writing class, and he just goes, well, no, he didn't say anything. He just sort of zeroed in that he thought I was funny. And so every time he would make a joke, he would lean in and look at me to see if I was laughing. And he did that the entire next 2 years. He just thought that we had some sort of inside joke that I was always like, I have no idea. But the most wonderful thing that Gregory Orr taught me, and I still have students do this every every time I teach a creative writing class. So he has his beautiful poem, A Litany, about the death of his brother. And what he has us do as students is to start the clock for 10 minutes. And the only rule is that we can't stop typing. And so the poem A Litany is, I remember blah, blah, blah. Like it's like a very short poem. But what he has us do is say, I remember, and then you just start writing, I remember. And so you create this massive document of things that you remember. And then he has you do it multiple times throughout the semester. And I have this like 40-page document of things that you weren't like even aware of, like the way that your brain remembers things. And it was wonderful. And I still have it. And it's important. And it's one of those things I go through every time I think about writing. I'm like, okay, what's that? And it's the way that your brain correlates one memory with another thing. And one of the rules was that he would never ask to see it. So it was utterly honest, and it was utterly vulnerable and real. So,
yeah, I think that's an important rule too, that nobody should see it, because that keeps it honest. And Maribade and KYV, I guess it's two people with the same account, wants to know about the process of sharing your poems with people in your life, family, and if that limits what you write, and how.
That is a very, really, very real question. And it's one that I'm still not quite used to. I mean, one really helpful piece of advice was that people, I can't even remember who gave it to me, but it was like, don't underestimate the fact that people will be flattered that you write about them. And that's important. But at the same time, so there was that aspect of it, but at the same time, there also is the worry. And I wrote a poem that there were a couple poems, like So Skin and Other Weapons, and then It's You I Like is a poem about gun control that I wrote having been on the phone with my sister for several different occasions, and her just being so upset. She was a teacher, and so I used various names of my nieces and my cousins, like nieces and nephews per se. And I wrote them, and I asked permission before the book came out. And it was never like an issue. Like they were just like, oh yeah, like they were very, very welcoming and very kind about it. And for that to be a vessel. And then there are also things that I wish I had shown to people. My uncle passed away, and I really wasn't sure whether or not to show him a particular poem that was a love letter to my cousin, his daughter. And I wish I had, because my cousin loves the poem, and so sometimes it just takes a little bit of bravery to just ask the person and see if they're cool with it, and often it is, often it's not. So, asking is the right way to do it. But yeah, it does give you pause. And like, it's one thing to start to write it, and you have like as an outlet to write, and then it's a totally different animal to suddenly be confronted with this being a book out in the world under your name.
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's something that I struggle with myself. Like I have poems, a whole bunch of poems I've never published or shown to anybody, and maybe someday I will, maybe not, and I don't know. The writing itself is the thing that matters to me the most, I think. Like that process of discovery and learning about what you really think. We have time for maybe, since we started a little late, we have time for maybe two more poems and maybe one question in the middle. Do you want to like do a penultimate poem here?
Sure. Is there one that?
I don't know. Whatever you'd like to read. If there's anything that relates or just you felt like reading. And we have that Charlottesville poem too from Rattle 62 at some point.
Oh yeah, I got that one. Want to do that one as a
Yeah, sure. Let's do that one.
Since we're in Charlottesville here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and this one isn't in the book, but you guys were so kind to publish it. In Charlottesville after Charlottesville. Tonight they've hung up lights in Lilts across 2nd and Water Street on the downtown mall. A Christmas choir singing "O Holy Night." 24 people lined against the painted brick wall, its peeling curls. The wall will melt beside on one knee, face full of fear, a sidewalk of gum and toppled ice cream to ask if I could always call him mine. The same wall we crouched against in August, shielding our heads with our arms, our bags, our books, whatever brought along that might protect us from the rocks and spit they threw. Their emptied tear gas canisters hurled by arms roaring with blood, their faces doing that angry Goya thing with the colors. My mother called hours after Heather last breathed, called only to make sure that our front door was locked, that I remembered tomorrow was a holy day of obligation, her own version of danger. That time in August, flowers weren't blooming, but there was one frail rose in our rented front yard, and we could see it from the upstairs window, the rose, but also the gunmetal gray Dodge, plate GVF 1111, 3 houses down, abandoned and blood-caked from taking Heather's life and mowing over others, full throttle forward, then revved into reverse, the steel front bumper severed, like 2 arms bent, palms up and sorry. A card to take a person places, not to take someone away. And in the window, Will became more beautiful to me, his fingers on the glass, all of them his, now sort of mine too. The driver ran into the woods to crouch and hide out like a squirrel. We walked our dog through those woods that morning, green and lush, as if beauty's sole defense was to just always be beautiful. On the Feast of the Assumption, Charlottesville opened their eyes as if a body punctured, tiki torches on fire, adult children playing with their father's guns. Tonight, snow falls peacefully and the choir sings, "Fall on your knees," and because we have nothing else to give, we do.
Yeah, beautiful poem, a beautiful ending, and still timely. It's 2 years old, but still very timely this summer too. I wanted to ask you. Yeah, I wanted to ask. I sort of hate to ask this question, but I'm dying to know the answer. So your husband is like a literal rock star, and you got a guitar next to you. Like he's that Will you mentioned in the poem, right?
Oh yeah, you're right. It's right here, yeah.
So he's in the band Parachute, which I'm a big music person, but I've heard a bunch of his songs because they're hit songs. So how do you mentioned earlier that bringing meaning into the world is important to you as a poet, and how do you reconcile? Because if you, like on this Rattlecast episode, right? Maybe 100 people are watching live right now. Maybe 1,000 people will watch it eventually and listen. But anytime he does a concert, because it's music, it's like thousands of people, right? In like a big auditorium. How do you reconcile the difference between like the popularity of poetry and how important it is to you? Is that something that you think about, or because the contrast between music and poetry is just so huge when it comes to popularity, and just as me, like I go through sort of phase where I'm like, am I wasting my life doing this thing that so few people care about? And then of course the fact that so few people care about is one of the beauties. So it's sort of this, it goes back and forth. But how do you go about thinking about that?
Man, oh boy. I mean, it's a little bit freeing in the sense, like there's a little bit more of a margin of of like, if you write a kind of bad poem, it might not matter as much.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that the one thing that's really cool about people who are adamant about poetry, but particularly what's really wonderful about Rattle, and I'm not just saying this because we're here, but I remember when I was like years ago, I remember when I got an email from I think you guys had published something of mine, or it had been on like the daily things that you guys send out, and he's the main photographer for American for ABT, American Ballet Theater in New York City. And I was like, oh, they've cracked the code. They've figured out how to show that poetry matters to multiple different art forms.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really feel necessarily confined by that. And it might be because I have the luxury of people who have been fans of Will and, his writing and that kind of thing, where it's expanded my platform. But one thing I just try to do is to just make sure that it matters to like a larger audience than just the people who only spend time in the poetry section at Barnes and Noble type thing. Mm-hmm. Like where it somehow gets them thinking about other things or bleeds into different art forms and that kind of thing. I don't know. So I really don't know, but I mean, he's one of my best readers. He's kind of like my, he does all of my, I call him my secretary and I'm his copy editor. So we give and take, and it's kind of wonderful to be married to someone who writes and reads as much and as intentionally and as intentionally and ardently as I do, where we do it to different ends or to different means, but it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. I used to date people like back in the day who just, I think if I would have ended up with them, it would have been just like a very lonely existence, just sitting there in my room writing instead of writing it and him being like, okay, I don't understand all of I don't get poetry, but I can see this and I can follow it, and this is beautiful. It would just be, it's just a huge gift to marry a fellow writer. Mm-hmm. And to also know that you have your own kind of thing and he has his own kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's an inarticulate way of putting it.
No, that's a great answer. Daniel Mask asks if you've collaborated with him, and it's just, there's something really interesting. I feel like popular things versus poetry are sort of going in two completely different directions. Like the goal, like with poetry, you're sort of like trying to slice things up and dissect them and learn something new, and with music, you're trying to sort of have a coherence. So it's sort of like you're dividing and stirring things up and challenging people when it comes to poetry, like we write and publish, right? And with music, you're trying to bring people together. So it's like a completely different style, or not even style, but just like goal to me. Do you think that's true? And have you collaborated, and do you find that possible?
Yeah, we co-wrote a song called When You Move. And the other ones, like, I just sort of take a glance at, or he'll yell at, like, what works with this like phrase, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so we're constantly yelling back and forth. But I've lately kind of stepped out of it, and sometimes he makes me, I do not sing. As all of you can hear, I don't have like a very lovely voice, like just even speaking. But so sometimes he makes me do some background vocals and that kind of thing. But No. But so we wrote When You Move together, and I copy edit occasionally, but that's it.
Sounds good. We'll have to look that one up. Let me ask you one more question, then we'll finish out with one last poem. You mentioned on email that you're working on a different project that's not poetry. Can you say anything a little bit about that? I was just curious what you're working on.
I can't. Well, it's so I kind of so when this book came out was 2017, and I was sort of like ready to take a good year off. I was sort of a little bit done with poetry for just a year, thinking no. And my husband, then fiance, had moved up to Brooklyn to be close by. I was living on the Upper East Side, and so to be in the same city. And I was taking a nap at his house, and Evan Boland, the late Evan Boland, bless her, called, and I hadn't applied to the Stegner, but she had saved my work, and so she asked me to come to Stanford, and so we did. So then that was 2 more years of writing poetry when I was really just wanting to kind of like take a break. And so what I thought about a lot during that time, and what I was showing them different work that I'd started as an undergraduate and then revisited, and also had become fascinated with work that transcended, or not transcended, but like that played around with different genres, like Maggie Nelson's, her Argonauts and Bluets, or Rachel Zucker's Museum of Accidents, and places where they mixed poetry with fiction, with nonfiction, and all of it sort of amalgamation. So that's what I'm doing. It won't be under my name for my own safety, but
interesting.
So it'll be under a nom de plume.
Well, that's really interesting. How do you can promote something that's not under your own name? That's tricky. Yeah. Interesting. Well, we'll have to see. Well, we won't even see how it what comes of it.
Well, it's about trauma with that a lot of women go through. Just so many people go through it, and so it's just who knows? It might not even see the light of day. We'll see. It doesn't have a publisher, so I'm just working on it.
Well, cool. Good to hear that. Do you want to finish out with one last poem, whatever you want?
Sure. All right. Let me find one. Sorry. Can I read Crazy? Or
sure.
Wait.
Sure. Whatever you want.
Oh.
The only rule is you have to tell me the page number so I can find it for everybody.
All right. I'll read it. It's You I Like.
Okay.
We talked about that before. That's one about, it's page 73.
Okay.
It's You I Like. My sister spins her wine glass by its stem, searching for adult versions of the childproof words she speaks in every day. How the alarm for an active shooter drill sounded different than the one they use for fires, ringing out at school this morning like European sirens in an Anne Frank movie. Her first graders looking up from phonics workbooks to watch her lock their windows down. Shut the blinds to daylilies, tiger-striped and lazy on the playground. Cover the classroom's frosted door with black cotton like mirrors when in mourning. How she squeezed her 24 kids into the supply closet. Bodies small enough to somehow fit, taught to squat down low against the floor. How practice and preparation are not the same exactly, though they can seem so. Fear speaking its own language in each child. Whimpers from Eloise crouched in the back. Jack's eyes wide as if a punishment is fault. A ball of wetted underwear hidden in Manishka's fist, and James knows everyone is scared, so he is asked to sing the Mr. Rogers song. And though it broke the rules, my sister let them. Just this once, and only at a whisper, let them sing. It's you I like, not the things you wear, not the way you do your hair, but it's you I like. James, who told her once, anticipation is the sincerest form of affection. Big words, but not for James, who learned it in Korean too, who claps erasers without ever being asked, and starts his day before the bell with push-ups in the middle of the aisle, who got in trouble last week with Salvatore, snickering at cartoon illustrations of Princess Jasmine's cleavage, the Aladdin book confiscated for a while. The way you are right now, the way down deep inside you, not the things that hide you. 24 children huddled behind a door covered on the other side by maps of the earth in quilted color to teach them that if you look for the world, you can find it. But it's you I like, every part of you, your skin, your eyes, your feelings, whether old or new. And the principal walks the hallway, rattling doorknobs, testing the locks. My sister, certain that it's sound that she would use the wrench and can of wasp spray hidden in her file cabinet to protect them if she could. Her belief in evil, not yet taken entirely by her faith that she can ward it all away. I hope that you remember, even when you're feeling blue, their heads popping up from the ground to point around to each other like my sister taught, that it's you I like, it's you yourself, it's you. A seasick silence at its finish, and James begins the song again. The others follow, quiet little choir in the almost total dark, faces pressed against the floor, singing to some goodness in our world.
Ooh, another beautiful poem. Thanks so much, Courtney Kampa. And that was It's You I Like from Our Lady of Not Asking Why. Thanks so much for joining us today, Courtney. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and get to know you a little better and hearing these awesome poems directly from the source.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, have a good rest of your night, and I'll see you later.
Okay,
bye. Okay. Yes, that was Courtney Kampa, and once again, her book from New Issues Press is Our Lady of Not Asking Why. It's from Western Michigan University. They don't have a website on the book, but you can find Courtney Kampa's work at courtneykampa.com. Yeah, courtneykampa.com, and that's for people listening at home. That's COURTNEYKAMPA.com. Our Lady of Not Asking Why. Now let's move over to the open mic portion of the show. And once again, the phone number, we have a bunch of people lined up already. We have Richard Westheimer, Caitlin Bucksbaum, Michelle Parks, Angela Gartner, the usual gang, Jess D, Cameron Gray. We have a 774 number, and maybe 864. If you're at 864, call me again, because the phone came in early, and I'm not sure if it was somebody who wanted to be on or not. It was like an hour before the show started, but yeah. So send your poem to openmic@rattle.com, and then the Skype, of course, is all one word, Rattle Poetry. Send me a chat message there if you'd like to share your poem. And the phone number is 818-850-7727. And let's see. Now, the prompt for this week, just to remind you, it was, here we go. This was this week's prompt, which was write a poem in a form you've never tried before. And when we had a suggestion that Writer's Digest has a great list of poetic forms, so Robert Brewer does that. It's writersdigest.com, and if you just type that into a search engine, you can find this list. It's listed as 50 here, but he's up to 100 on his list. Now, for my poem for this week, I picked a cinquain, which is 5 lines, sort of haiku-like poem, and it's syllabic, so you count syllables in this kind of poem. It's 2, and then 4, and then 6, and then 8, and then back to 2. So it's a syllabic little poem. And I was thinking last week, at the country club, while the kids were, well, it's not really a country club. It's a lake. that we call a country club in our little town because you have to join to be able to swim there. But at the country club, the kids were swimming and I was sitting there watching them and just thinking about how, God, they grew up so fast and how the summer's half over and sort of like their childhood is half over and like my life is half over. And it kept going on like that. So this is my cinquain. It's called Twin Lake at Sunset. And there's something too about, it's called Twin Lake, which is a sort of ironic title because there used to be a twin. And now the lake is filled in the second lake. So it's just one twin lake here where we live. And here you go. This is my cinquain. Twin Lake at Sunset. Even now the tadpoles at the swimming hole are sprouting limbs like summer's almost over. I'll read it again because it's haiku-like. Even now the tadpoles at the swimming hole are sprouting limbs like summer's almost over. Now Megan wrote a nonnet, and I forgot to look up, let me do that really quick, a nonnet. I don't know the actual deal. A lot of these forms on this list are completely new to me. Let's look up a nonnet. So it's a 9-line poem, also syllabic. It has 9 syllables, then 8, then 7, going down to 1, apparently. So there you go. That's a nonnet. That makes sense. So this is interesting because I've never written in syllabics. I'm not a big fan of syllabics, honestly. I like feet, and so Megan picked the syllabic poem too, and this was her nonnet. After the drought, we stayed inside. After the drought, we stayed inside. You would think we were dying for it, that we would run into the streets, faces angled toward the sky, but we forgot our thirst, wanted to stay dry by our windows, watch the earth drink our loss. It's haiku-like, so I'll read it again. After the drought, we stayed inside. You would think we were dying for it, that we would run into the streets, faces angled toward the sky, but we forgot our thirst, wanted to stay dry by our windows, watch the earth drink our loss. And I can confirm it's very drought-like here. It would be nice if it rained. Another great poem by Megan. A nonnet. Another new form to me, too. So let's see what you did here. Who was the first on the call list? I think it was Angela Gartner. And a couple of people asked if I would read, at least one person asked if I would read for them, which is totally fine if there's time. I want to get to the people who are waiting live to talk, though, so we'll do them first. Let's call up Angela Gartner. Hey, Angela. You got it on mute?
Having quickly could draw. So.
Good job. Okay, so let me play it in. Although I used to have it, so oops, here we go. There you are. How are you doing tonight?
Good, really good.
And what style of poem? I see it was a concrete poem. Is there anything you want to say about writing in this style?
Well, it was kind of cool. Like, I actually did it. At first I'm like, how do they kind of do the shape? So you had to research like how to do the shapes. Mm-hmm. And for me, like I did it in like a InDesign file where I actually I drew it like with my pen in InDesign, and then I and that's how it kind of got the shape. And
it looks like the Twitter icon. Is that how it's supposed to?
It's great. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I showed this to my mom, and she's like, because it's called Bluebird Problems, but she thought of it as a bluebird, but it's actually, I drew like I was inspired by Twitter for this poem. So yeah, that's so awesome you got that, because I didn't even, I was inspired by Twitter, and so that's kind of how it goes about. But I mean, I had a lot of fun. I'm going to do a hockey stick next because my sons play hockey, and I want like a cool hockey stick poem for them. So
there's a poet that we've published a few times. I can't remember his name right now, but he has these amazingly intricate, like one I remember that I think we published 2. One of them is about the Grateful Dead somehow. And it's like this flaming like guitar. It's the graphic design. I wish I could remember his name, but I can't. But maybe I could put it in the show notes if it comes to me later. But it's similar to this concrete style where it's very, very visual. Here you go. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a fun way to do it. But okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
The bluebird of societal problems perverts its cheerful beak. It sits on its wire and waits to take down its prey. It idles in the night, and then, when the dawn breaks, it takes advantage of the fearful emotions of the curious who hop in its path. The bluebird does not care about the chatter from the flock, the ones who peck at each other until they almost bleed, those short-tempered wingnuts who ruffle each other's feathers and put out their chests in name of their nest. They insist on their guile talk as they molt mounds of fluff. They sing woefully silly songs and spew bile onto branches of the trees. The receptacle preening allows flinchingly followers to chirp their agreements. The bluebird, in the unsocial posture, waits above with its sharp claws. It seems unaware of the pain and panic it causes when it swoops down to feed. Distinctive crests in the row squawk at the sky in surprise. They can't take flight because of a hunger of their own.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, and that's definitely Twitter. Very creative. I love that ending too. Yeah, good job. Good poem, Angela. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. Have a great
You
night.
too.
And Courtney was awesome. So
Yeah,
thank
she's
you.
a great poet too. Yeah, have a good night.
You too.
Okay, let's see, who is next? Michelle Parks? Let's call it Michelle. And if you're new to this, which I think most people on the list coming up are not new, but two things, I'm calling from the future because there's like a 30-second delay, so be prepared. And also, when I do call, turn off your YouTube stream. Michelle, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. How
Hey,
are you?
I'm good. Let me pull you in so everybody can hear you too.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you're like over. There you go. Hello, Michelle. How you doing tonight?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. And I love the later time. I don't know about everybody else. I'd
Yeah.
like to do this late all the time. Also, the kids are already in bed, so I don't have to worry about getting the kids to bed. So let me try to find your poem. Is this a eulogy?
Elegy.
Elegy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, elegy.
I just spoke, yeah. I didn't actually study poetry in forms. I took a workshop one semester in college, but I was a party kid, so I didn't make it often. But this poem I cheated with, and you'll recognize it maybe, but I didn't think other people would. But I really just needed an open mic tonight,
Uh-huh.
so I hope you don't mind.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, go ahead and let me put it on screen for everybody.
Thank
There you go. Okay,
you.
go ahead whenever you're ready, Michelle.
Okay, it's called Gulf. Love me as though you've never known war. The burning horizons were only a dream. Bodies of your brothers rise from the sea, mating with mermaids who give birth to boys who grow up strong and never bleed. Love me how you want it to be, as though the scars on your cheek were from climbing a tree when you were 7 years old, had always been free. Caught a glimpse of heaven just before the fall, body fully mended, just in time for spring. Love me how it always should be. Fill my womb with your tears, grant rebirth through me, as though the worries of the world could be damned by great deeds of noble women, untainted by greed. Love me as though we were pure, naked, unknowing, at the dawn of the earth, immortalized with each touch, each kiss. Love me as though death were a lie.
Beautiful poem. And that was Michelle Parks reading Golf. Thanks so much for sharing that, Michelle. I love the way you read. You always have so much emotion and you let the words speak, which I need to learn how to do. I read too fast. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Okay, let's call up. Caitlin is next. Well, yeah. So if you're at that 864 number, call me again. I'm not going to call unless you call again because that was an hour and 40 minutes before the show started. So I don't want to wake anybody up who's not prepared for a phone call. Although I think everybody just turns their phone off at night these days, right? Maybe not. Maybe that's just me. All right, calling up Caitlin Bucksbaum.
The delay was much smaller this time, so...
Really? Well, good to see you. Let me shrink it, because once again, you have a great internet connection. Okay.
Right.
So how you doing tonight, Caitlin?
I have a lot of feelings after Courtney's interview, and poems, and everybody else's too. And I feel super unworthy tonight because I really wanted to do this prompt, and I tried 3.5 different forms in the last 2 days. So
wow.
I didn't give myself enough time. So this isn't my most wonderful work, I don't think, but I tried.
And this is the Welsh Rupant?
Yeah, so it's spelled Rupant, but I saw that it was pronounced creepant or something.
Yeah.
Creepant?
Well, I am
don't know.
the most ignorant person in the world, so I'm sure that's true.
But because of the Welshness, I don't know. I don't know anybody who's Welsh or know anything about that, but I thought a Welsh title for this poem was appropriate. So, and again, I'll probably butcher the pronunciation. I think it's Paiduk ag aros, and it means don't wait. So.
And can you explain the form a little bit, just so people can know what they're looking at when they do it?
Yeah. Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention is just that I have been writing poetry for a long time, in formal and informal settings, so it was hard to find a form that I hadn't done already.
Oh, really?
And all that's left is the hard ones. So this form, there's 2 versions of it. I don't know if people can see that on the screen. I don't think it'll all fit at once, but you can write them 2 different ways. So they're 4-line stanzas, so quatrains, and they're only 4 syllables per line, so that's not a lot to work with. And the first 3 lines rhyme, and then the last line has the same rhyme for every stanza, so people will be able to see that. But you can also rewrite it as each of those 4-line stanzas is 1 line. So my poem would be a 5-line poem with longer lines. So I showed the longer version at the bottom just in case people wanted that reference.
That's interesting. And all these syllabic forms make me realize, reading submissions, there are probably a lot of poems that are in form that I have no idea, because you don't hear it when you read. That's the thing that kind of bugs me about syllabic forms, is that it's to me a poem is very audio. You hear the music of it. And so syllabics that's not how speech works. So,
but there is a lot of rhyme in this one too.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready. This is, I'm not even going to try to say what it is, but go ahead.
Yeah. The English translation is don't
Okay.
wait. A waning moon would just as soon sing you a tune as wait for love to swell your chest at fate's behest. She does not rest as God above all mortal souls, whose patience doles not warm but cold death and blood. So wait not long for that sweet song to which belongs the night's lone dove, and do not mind the path behind. You will not find him there, my love.
Oh, that was great. I like that form a lot, actually. Well, very well done.
Thanks. Last thing that I was just going to say is that when I was trying these Welsh and Irish forms, I found myself gravitating towards a more medieval style of speech. So I don't know what it is about these short rhyming forms that drive me to speak like someone from 500 years ago. But
yeah, it's what you've heard. You've only heard poems like this in those forms, so it feels right. But yeah, you could. It is a strong form. You can really feel it. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Caitlin, and good to learn about that form too.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye. Let's see. So next up, we will have. Jess D says, I have a short stinky poem. Guessing that smell if we get time. Let's see Jess's short stinky poem. And I have to find, let's see. Hey Jess, you there?
Hey,
There's like an echo.
Yes. Can you
I see you and hear you, but the connection. Let's let it buffer for a second.
I see you and hear you, but the connection. Let's let it buffer for a second.
There's a big echo. Is it gone?
There's a big echo.
Uh-oh.
Is it gone?
Oh no.
Do you want to call on the phone?
Yeah.
Oh wait, you know what? I think it's gone. It was just some weird buffery thing. Okay. So how are you doing tonight, Jessica? It's good now.
I'm doing really well. I appreciate this late night Rattlecast. It's I don't know. It carries me into the many hours I'm going to stay awake. So
yeah. Well, if too many people say that, I'm just going to change the time to like midnight because I like late at night. It's really fun to do. I just need to like take up smoking or something so I can have the room full of smoke or something.
Cigars, a specific kind of smoking.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah. Then I can die of COPD like Art and Bell. So what was your form? what was your form that you wanted to share?
I am going to butcher how you probably actually say it, but it's a treochair, Treo.
Treochair. No, I'm just kidding. I have no idea. I'm just messing with you.
Great.
Yeah.
It's an Irish form, and so that I feel like there's some funk on it probably, but it's any number of terse sets, and it's also goes by syllables, so it's 3 and then 7/7 per each terse set, and not only that. The first and third lines have to rhyme, and it needs to be packed with alliteration.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's super a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, and it's a stinky poem.
Yeah,
it's interesting how many syllabic. Did you say it was Irish or Welsh? Which one did you say?
Irish.
Irish. Yeah, the Irish and Welsh just love their syllabics. Apparently, this is news to me. I did not know. Okay, well, go ahead whenever you're ready. Guessing that smell. A treochair.
Yeah. All right, guessing that smell. What's that smell stinking up my surroundings, wafting so awfully well? Where and why? And what will I discover? Decidedly, it's not I. Could it be moldy meat or funky feet? Oh, odor, quit killing me. I'm sorry.
No, it's great having some light verse. I love getting to laugh at some poems. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, who is next? These are really good poems. These are a lot of fun. When I saw the prompt for this week, I thought, oh no. But actually, I'm liking these. Let's see. Let's do we have Brent, we have Richard Westheimer, we have a 774. Let's do the 774 number and see who that is. Let's see who sent me some poems. Maybe Sally Dunn, perhaps? Hey, this is Tim with Rattle. Did you want to share a poem for the prompt this week?
Yes, I did.
And who am I talking to?
Sally Dunn.
Ah, that's what I figured, because it's the one person I didn't have on my list by name. So what was your form, Sally, that you used today?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce the form right, but it's Sistina?
Yeah, Sistina, exactly.
It's a French form, and it's basically you got 6 words, and you got to repeat those words at the end of each line, and it goes in a different order. Like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it's 6, 1, 5, 2, 4, 3.
You know what? I never knew that. I thought you could just do any old random order you wanted. So here I am, a professional poetry editor, and I did not know you were supposed to go in order like that. But I see if you have it laid out in the number, and I would have to check Sistina's from now on. I never knew that you're supposed to do it. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 1 through 6, and then starting with 6. Interesting. That is complicated.
Yeah, I'd never even heard of it either, but...
Well, I've heard of Sistina's. We published a bunch, including one. There was one by Kim Adenizio in that issue in the spring. But I never knew that the words had an order. I thought it was just like a random, you got to fit these 6 words in. So
No. It's an interesting form. And one thing I liked about the form is you don't have to count meter or syllables or feet or anything because I'm terrible at that. So.
Okay, well, go ahead. It's ready whenever you're ready. Let's hear it.
Okay. In strolled the cat. Out galloped the dog. Up flew the bird. Solid stood the tree. Bored watched the sky. Around roiled the earth. The sky cradled the earth. The children chased the cat. The earth basked in the sky. I played with the dog. The one-armed man sat in the tree. The collector stuffed the bird. The student cataloged the bird. The sky tossed a meteor at the earth. The one-armed man fell from the tree. The children skinned the cat. I was bitten by the dog. The earth spit ash at the sky. The earth threw rocks at the sky. A drawer closed on the bird. I chased the dog. The sky dropped the moon on the earth. The children poked the skinned cat. The one-armed man kicked the tree. The one-armed man howled at the tree. The earth hurled angels at the sky. The children watched vultures eat the cat. Dust coated the bird. The sky tossed the angels back to the earth. I killed the dog. I dissected the dog. The one-armed man cut down the tree. The arm sprinkled angel feathers on the earth. The earth vomited blood into the sky. The janitor threw out the bird. The children collected the bones of the cat. The earth embraced the dog. The cat's ghost climbed the ghost tree. The sky mourned the bird.
Oh, that was really cool. The cat's ghost climbed the ghost tree. I love that line. It's interesting how this pushes you forward. Like you started with the end stop at each line, and then the form just keeps pushing you forward, making it more and more interesting. Yeah, that was cool. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was Sally Dunn with Sistina.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Good night. Okay, I think we're just going to keep going until we get everybody because the kids are already in bed. So I think I do have to end by 2 hours. So I think we have 15 minutes still. I think we can get to everybody. Richard Westheimer, we'll call him up. Richard's a regular. We haven't had him in a while, a couple weeks. Let's see how Richard's doing. Hey, Richard, good to see you. How you doing tonight?
Hey, Tim. Oh, it's complicated.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little tough seeing my fellow countrymen hauled into vans in the streets of some of my favorite cities.
Is something new happening tonight? I've been totally out of the loop all day.
Yeah, you don't want to know.
Okay, well, I guess I'll have to look at it after we're done. I don't want to, but I've been avoiding Twitter because the Mets are playing now, and they show the scores, and there's no way to turn off the scores. So that was my one sort of access. I don't watch TV. I get Poetry Spawn on Saturdays, and I get some Twitter, but now I'm not even getting Twitter, so I don't even know. Maybe I don't want to know.
Yeah, no.
Let me find your...
You'll see in my poem, you don't want to know.
Yeah. So what was your form? Was this the opening day 2020?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this form is a bop, only so a bop is a poem. It's 3 verses where they progress from a problem that is presented, an exploration of the problem, then either a failure to resolve the problem or a resolution. And there's supposed to be a refrain in between each. And I wrote the poem first with the refrain, and then I decided I liked the poem better without it.
Oh, yeah? Interesting.
So I cheated.
Well, that's totally fine. It's the point is to be inspired by to do something different, and so that worked either way, regardless of how much you stick to it. It's another form I hadn't heard of before, and I was looking at it on that list. I guess 'cause it starts with B, so it was near the top. But
right.
Yeah, that's cool. So okay, go ahead whenever you're ready. This is opening day 2020.
And one other note: I tried to write a golden shovel, which I wrote about and seen some that I liked, but you get stuck with these weird words, like the wrong pronouns at the end of sentences and things like that just make the poem fall apart and that you have to push into. So it's harder than it looks.
It definitely is. And then a lot of times that like tricks you into doing something you wouldn't have tried otherwise. That's like the trick of form, is that it forces you to like explore different possibilities that you wouldn't have reached at before, I think. So opening day 2020, let's hear it.
Here we go. I've not listened to a ball game since the before times, 1999, I think. But now, from my bunker, I long for the crack of the bat, for beer ads and play-by-play. So I reach for the radio. I have no radio. I say, "Hey Siri, play the game." I look to Alexa. I surf the web, and all I find are pictures of the hometown boys, decked in red, performing before fake crowds like vaudeville song and dance men. I sink in some vanishingly small loneliness, miss something I didn't know I've longed for. I've been zombie reading Twitter rants, Zoom bombed my own meetings, stared through the screen as if it were some Nicene icon, peered at others' dining tables, into their bedrooms, those places of earthly delights, now the designated hitters for pressing the flesh. So I need that ball game, the crowd noise, a radio, please.
I hear you. That was opening day 2020. Thanks for sharing that. That's kind of ironic that I brought that up without even knowing. Yeah.
So Siri responded to me reading the poem.
Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Yeah, good, Bob. Thank you for sharing that, Richard.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye. Okay. Let's see. I want to make sure I get to everybody. We have Brent and Cameron Gray. Let's do. Oh, and there was a poem that I promised I would read. So let me do that before I forget, because I am a forgetful person. Now, this next poem, this was Maria Alberg, and she asked if I would read it for her. She says, "I'm so glad I showed up for David Romsvet last week. Great show. I enjoy exploring forums and was inspired by some new ones I found on the Writer's Digest list. I spent some time with the Kuwith Laws Gurnog, and wrote something I like. I would rather you read this attempt, if that's okay with you." So she's watching on YouTube now, and you can find her at experiencewriting.com, I guess. So this is Summer Weekend by Maria L. Berg. Oops, not that one. Summer Weekend by Maria L. Berg. She speaks ill as I choose rest, away from all her unknown guests, her weekly test, social prod pushing further to move my lines, my inaction to sharpen tines, her tongue reminds longer rod. We flounder at this lakeside house, burning with fire we cannot douse, the secret gouges, sown reward, leaving behind the sweat of clothes, the slick green slime between our toes, yet cling to those loathed jabs scored. A boat aflame might break in half, reeved from the pain in my left calf. Indistinct laugh echoes end, when laughed at me who can but hear her ill intentions daylight clear. She thinks I fear, soon to amend. Interesting. That was a great Summer Weekend poem. I love formal poetry. I'm sorry. These are just great. That was Maria L. Berg reading her Summer Weekend. And I love meter and rhyme and form. I wish we had more submissions that did that. Okay, now let's call up. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Maria. Let's see. Let's do Cameron Gray. I think we have two left. We have Brent and Cameron. We have 8 minutes before the 2-hour YouTube limit, or whatever, iTunes limit. Let's call up. Oops, I think I called. Let me see. Cameron Gray. Yeah, okay, she's over the phone. That's the thing. Let's do Cameron Gray. I added people's names so I can know who I'm actually calling a little bit.
Hello?
Hey, Cameron, it's Tim with Rattle. Did you want to share the Tuesday prompt poem? Oh, this was the really fun little erasure.
Picture.
Yeah.
the picture.
Yeah, this is really cool. Yeah, I'll put it on screen and then you can read it. Do you want to say anything about the form? I think it's something we actually had an erasure as a prompt by me like 3 months ago or something. Do you want to explain what an erasure is, just for people who don't know?
It's just where you take something that wasn't a poem and you black it out to leave a poem in it. You know, you leave a poem pretty much.
Yeah, very cool.
But I looked around at video game cartridges and deodorant bottles, and then I couldn't find anything cool, and then I just looked at the prompt again, and it came to me. So,
very cool. So it's on screen now if you want to read it. It's really short.
Okay. Next week's prompt. Write. You've never tried before. Compile a great list. Digest. Write better. For poets.
That is great. I really enjoyed that. I read that like a week ago or when you sent it. And that was a really fun one. Thanks for sharing that.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Good night.
Night.
That was Cameron Gray, and that's Cameron with a K, by the way. And Gray with an E. Let's see. So I think we have one last poet to call in. Let me make sure I haven't missed anybody on the list. Yeah, we got that. Okay. Let's do Brent. Let's do, let's call it Brent. Hey, Brent, how you doing tonight?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I can't see you yet if you want to click the camera. If you don't, that's fine too.
How's this?
Here you come. Yep.
This me?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
We're here.
Yeah, awesome. So how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great. What a fun night it's been.
Yeah, every night is, but good stuff tonight.
The initial interview was great, and I'm really surprised by the strength of all these form poems.
Yeah, me too. And hopefully it like encourages people to write in form more, because I love form. So what is the form that you did today?
Well, I did Terza Rima. It's not very exotic. I was really knocked out by the different forms that I'd never heard of that we've heard tonight. But since I don't write in form, it was easy for me to find one I hadn't done before.
Yeah, this is a good form. I like this a lot.
Yeah, I have been. I read it, but now I'm listening to Stephen. I want to say Steven Pinker, but that's not right. Stephen Pinsky.
Robert Pinsky. Yeah.
Robert Pinsky. Sorry. Translation of Dante's Inferno, and he translated it. I mean, of course, it's written in Terza Rima.
Yeah.
And he translated it that way too. And the audiobook is amazing. It's got him reading it. Seamus Heaney they take turns.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Cantos.
That's cool. Yeah.
And Louise Glick and some other really fine poets who are also fine readers. And
we interviewed Pinsky shortly after that came out, and I remember he kept saying he really wanted to drive home the point. There was the shortest translation of that ever. He was very proud that he condensed it as much as anybody ever had. Yeah.
It's extremely readable, you know. And then when I was looking up, when I decided to do a Terza Rima, I looked it up, and there's something called a Terza Rima sonnet. And so I figured I'd try one of those. Usually they end in a couplet. But I wrote what I thought was the penultimate line and thought, oh, no, wait, that's good.
Yeah. You can make it. You can always make it your own. That's the power of being a poet.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's hear it. This is the author decides against an expedition.
Yeah. The author decides against an expedition. The things I had to say are in the deep end of the pool. They wave like the raging hair of a drowned maenad. The bright tresses bend with the wake of unseen kids kicking up for air. 20 years languish between the top of the water and the rounded blue floor, obscuring what's there. Long blurred shadows swim slowly past each other, gliding in great circles like dreaming sea serpents. To disturb them seems treacherous. What unborn daughter might lift her pale head to see a diver at such depths?
Very cool. That was the author decides against an expedition. I love that the choice too to end in that one line. There's something about like doing rhyme and then like stopping that adds power to it. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that. That was Brent Stauffer. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Thanks so much. Yeah, appreciate it. Have a good one. Bye.
Okay, so I think that was the last person on the list. Let me double check because I don't want to miss anybody. Okay, yeah, so we're good to go. Yeah, thanks everybody. It's been a great night. I was a little worried about the time being too late, but apparently it wasn't. Don't worry, we're always going to be doing 9 o'clock though, I think. As much as I would like to do it later, it's hard to ask poets regularly to do it that late at night, especially when most people, the majority of our the poets we interview are on the East Coast of the United States. So 9 o'clock is kind of the latest, and then 6 o'clock on the West Coast is a good time where people are home from work usually, back in the day when people went to work because it wasn't social distancing. Now, next week's prompt is right here. Write a poem about a Greek god or goddess. So that's Megan's prompt for next week. Write a poem about a Greek god or goddess. And when was it? Recently we interviewed a poet. We talked about Greeks. Oh, it was Ron Kurchi, because he has a book about sort of modernizing the Greek gods. And I'm trying to remember the name of the book. I can't remember. But so we were talking about Greek gods and goddesses and how I don't really know many. So this will be an interesting opportunity to explore and learn a little bit more from me personally about a new Greek god. Hope you enjoy that prompt. Once again, that is write a poem about a Greek god or goddess for next week. Now, that is it for our show today. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Great poems on the open mic. Great poems for Courtney Kampa. Once again, her book was Our Lady of Not Asking Why. You can check her out at CourtneyKampa.com, like Courtney, Kampa.com. So check out her book there. Now, next week's guest is going to be James Reagan. In his new book, The Chanter's Reed. Now, James Reagan is really a poet who's very dear and close to us at Rattle. I'm not sure if I have the story completely right. My understanding is that Alan Fox met James Reagan on a cruise, like in the early 90s. And they just happened to like start talking. And James is or at the time was the head of the MFA program at USC. And Alan happened to mention that he'd always loved poetry and wanted to be a writer more, and he'd gone into real estate and was a lawyer and things like that. And James Reagan convinced him to come to the MFA program, or technically the MPW, Masters of Professional Writing program, that James Reagan was the director of at the time, and for like 25 years. He was also the director of the program when I went there. So I have my master's in professional writing, which I think is actually pretty cool because I think professional writing looks better in a resume than fine arts, to be frank about that. But James Reagan is one of the most elegant poets, I would say. Just listening to him read, and he has them all memorized, and they're beautiful, beautiful poems. So really looking forward to this. James Reagan next week, August 4th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you then. Hope you have a great night. Good night.